So the idea from this class came from the last Iceland camp, where Christian thought it'd be funny to, because of how long I've spent working with Preet, thought it'd be funny to like do a class that sound funny to piss him off, and that sold it for me. So like the name came first, and then since then I've been trying to figure out what the hell to say. So anyone who's here expecting something entirely different, like you come with like a bag full of like rubber fists, like this is not the day for it. Sorry. So this class is, I was a member of Preet's defensive sex cult. This is what I found out. And it's basically the exact opposite of what I did on Monday. So a brief history. I met Preet Copenhagen 2017. It was his first camp. I'd already been going for years. I was a purple belt. I'd been competing at black belt for a while. I'm doing all right for myself. And I saw this Estonian guy on the poster, and I thought, Estonia? Who's ever heard of Estonia? Like, they haven't got good jiu-jitsu. He then wrecked me. Like, he fucked me up. And I was very much in the old way of doing jiu-jitsu at that point. Like, all I knew was what I picked up on YouTube or visiting different academies. And so I did the age-old typical framing whilst on the bottom to defend everything. And he wrecked me. He completely destroyed me. And oddly enough, that was the same week I got my brown belt at the end of camp, and I thought I was going to be demoted down to blue belt, like how badly he abused me. I said to him afterwards, like, what did I do wrong? And he says, you left your elbows out. I was like, fucking ain't. Like, they were in. I'm sure they were. Like, I ain't no white belt. It wasn't until actually this camp, 2 months later, that I actually clicked what he meant by elbows, and I completely did. And ever since then, I became a member of his defensive sex cult, which has only taken off around the world ever since then. And it was interesting because like no one really knew of his details back then, and then since then, seeing him explode has been amazing to watch. But one of the things that we both hear is this whole defensive posture stuff looks like bullshit. You wouldn't roll this way. And the best way I can describe it, and this is how it feels now being involved in this for the past 5 years, I will get to some drilling. I'm sorry, I talk a lot. Is imagine you are a member of a boxing gym, and everyone in that boxing gym is like fighting with their hands by their sides, just swinging at each other's faces, right? Like as hard as they can. And everyone just eats it on the chin, and then they hit each other back in the face, right? And then you meet myself or Preet, and we say, oh, did you think maybe covering your chin? And you're like, that's new. You then go back to your old gym and you go like that. All of a sudden, no one's hitting you in the face anymore, and it's like, what the hell's happened? That's what it feels like doing this, as in something so obvious. Like all we talk about in jiu-jitsu is attack or a positive action to deal with something. It has to be emotion instead of, is there just a way of being safe and defending myself? And so for me, now watching regular jiu-jitsu, it looks like walking into those boxing gyms where everyone's just swinging for the fences and everyone's got their hands by their sides. Like the fact that no one is covering their chin, and that's what we're trying to then change. So this is something I picked up from Preet. I paid for him to come to the UK, and he changed my gym, and we had to chuck everything out the window for the best part of 6 months because nothing worked. It's like, imagine now someone's come into your gym and said, all of you, put your hands up, and none of you know how to punch past that. All of a sudden, no one's getting hit, and it's like, well, jiu-jitsu's got super boring, super fast. And one of the main criticisms we get, like, from our videos is you guys don't do anything, you lie on the floor. Sparring isn't fighting, it is a learning tool. You have an idea and you're using it in a live setting. And we're just trying to figure out how to cover our chin more effectively. But boxers still get hit in the face, right? As in, you can't cover your chin and punch at the same time. You can't attack and defend. Does that make sense? And so since Monday's class, I've had quite a few people come up to me and go, right, well, some people in my gym already play this, or how do I get past this like defensive covering? And it's the exact same thing. Like, you don't attack when they're covering, you wait for them to move. Like, in theory, I could survive Floyd Mayweather, and it's hilarious this is going to go on video. Like, I don't need to know much about boxing, I just need to stand really fucking still and cover my chin. Like, I won't be able to hit the guy, and if I take a step in any direction, I'm dead. But whilst I'm perfectly still, I will survive. And that then becomes the interesting part of this game, is that playing against someone who does this, they can't move without exposing the gaps. You then learn to hunt gaps on people. You still hit them in the face, but you find out where those gaps are. You appreciate the armpits better. Does that make sense? And you appreciate hand fighting. So, and this is going to be actually a drill now, is about 6 months or a year later, we'd been playing Running Man and having great success of it and annoying other gyms. Pete returned to my gym and he wrecked me again, just for shits and giggles, really. And it's because I wasn't hand fighting. Can I roll, Charles?
Sure.
So, bit of Running Man. So I was like, away from me. So I thought, fuck you, old man. Like, there's no way you're going to get me now. I've been practicing your stuff for months. He then just grabbed hold of my wrist and went, that. I was like, oh, oh no, I'm going to die again. Which is actually really funny because I had a student who disappeared during this process. And when he came back, he, again, wild jiu-jitsu brain. And it's funny this has happened since I've even been here, is that I'll cover, and he was like doing some like iron fist shit, like trying to fire his hands through my, like, and so he paid for a private with me. He was like, Chris, like, I've come back, all you guys are assholes now, I can't get anything on anyone. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, you know, how are you getting the gaps? He goes, well, people go to run them out, I'm just doing this. I'm really hurting my fingers. You laugh. The amount of people who've done this since I arrived is hilarious. Like, they're literally just like iron fisting me in the side, thinking, why can't I get in? And I went, have you thought about holding their wrist first? And he was like, what? Yeah, just grab their wrist and open it. I was like, oh, that makes me feel stupid. And again, like, you come across this, like, if you come across anyone who does this level of nonsense, hand fight more, you appreciate hand fighting an infinite and more amount, and you learn to respect the armpits. Does that make sense? So if Charles was going to old school turtle with his arms wide open, all this kind of stuff now works. I can get in here, I can hold on and stuff like that. But if he does more modern turtle, shall we say, I can't get the gaps. Make sense? But to get here, it's a trench. Like, this is safety. He's dropped into a trench. Running Man is also a trench, right? But between the two is the battlefield, and he's got to pop out of his trench, run across the battlefield, and then drop into the next trench. And whilst he's running, I can shoot him. Does that make sense? And so, all of a sudden, I respect that. Like, he can't move. He can't do anything without opening these gaps. And all of a sudden, I have a huge respect for finding those things. So as he now goes from his Running Man to his turtle, both of those things, yeah, empty. Like, they're trenches. But if he just turns around, so do the same thing, but so everyone can see you. As he goes from his Running Man to his turtle, you look at this. Go through it slowly. Battlefield. And now I can hunt him. But if you don't, if all you ever get is people swinging with their hands down, you're always going to hit people in the face. But as soon as they put their hands up, you see a little drop and then you hit them. Nothing's changed. You're still going to hit them in the face. But you respect, like, those little details more. Does everyone get me so far? Like, it's been 10 minutes of me rambling, but has it started to, like, does this make sense? Thank God. And so we're going to have like a little drill for that. We're going to have a little trench drill. You're going to start in Running Man. So if you haven't went here the other day, involve nipples. Like I said, defensive sex cult. I put one nipple on the floor, my elbow sticking out the back, about 2 or 3 fingers worth, while my hand's still here. My legs are like a Z shape, so my body's at 12, my thigh is at 3, the rest of my leg is at 6. I can cover here. Elbow 2 fingers wider than my thigh, so my elbow collapses into my leg. I find it more comfortable. So that's position 1. You then go to position 2. Just turtle, elbows wider than my hips, head on top, so I can move if I have to. You then go between the two, and your partner's going to hunt you as you go between the two. Does that make sense? So as you move from one trench to one trench, so make sure your trenches are good first, like no one can get you when you're at safety, and now you have to get from one to the other. Does that make sense? And as you go, you're going to try and hunt your partner, and then you can have a bit of back and forth, as in, once you find like, okay, there's a gap there, your partner's then going to try and fix that gap. It's going to move in a way that blocks it, like, I don't know, covering or something like that, or move in a certain way and time it different, hand fight. And then you go one for one and just try and find a better way of hunting that gap. Does that make sense? Because all of a sudden, you then go to start respecting that slight drop of the hand. Instead of being given everything you want, you go, I see the gap now, I can hunt people. I mean, I don't want to sound insulting or ungrateful. I love rolling at camps. But I go back and I get hurt a lot more by my students. Is because here, if people aren't used to my work, they don't hunt me as much. As I move, like, I can be quite open. I can go like, and I'm fine. If I did that at home, they'd murder me. Like, does that make sense? Like, people aren't used to hunting my nonsense. But if you want to get good at defeating this kind of level of insanity, you're going to have to start hunting. So go from running man to turtle, and as they move, find that space. Does that make sense? And then get the control. Off you go. Enjoy. Just going to add to it a little bit. Yeah. So you can have a lot of fun. So bring it in. If you can hear over there, that's cool too. I went to a Ryan Hall seminar about 11 years ago, and there's something like really cool he said is that I'll paraphrase and extrapolate. Imagine there's like you have a hierarchy of needs in jiu-jitsu, and there's some things that are happening in the background, like subconsciously, and they're happening naturally, and your main focus is the fight at hand. You can shift up someone's hierarchy by messing with those subconscious things. By that I mean you're always subconsciously dealing with your breathing and your balance, but fighting is number one. The second you fuck with someone's breathing or balance, the hierarchy changes, and you have to deal with that before they can carry on fighting. As in, if you push over any belt, white belt or black belt, they have to put their hand out. It's a natural human instinct. Otherwise, you land on your face. And the only difference between a white belt and a black belt is you push over a white belt, they do this, and come back. You push over a black belt, they do this. Same reaction, just the gaps are a lot smaller. But then that's, some people have said this to me about turtle since I arrived here. It's like, well, how do you open up turtle? Like, some people kick me in the ass. Yeah, like, because they're making you mess up your balance, because you can't avoid it. Like, as soon as you mess up someone's balance, they have to open. And so it's quite a funny way of then dealing with people. It's also like a really fun way of dealing with people when they're trying to pass guard. It's one thing I do at home. So can I borrow a half guard, please? Sure. Is that if he's in my half guard, like if I've got a bit of a nichio going on, is whilst I'm playing in my half guard, I'll just keep kicking you in the sides. Because whilst you're balanced, like I say, number one is the fight, until I do this, and you have to put your hand out. You can't not. And whilst you put your hand out, you're not fighting me. And whilst I can't fall over anymore. I'm on my ass. But he's upright. So if I kick him, he puts his hand out. And whilst he then puts his hand out, I can then move. Does that make sense? But it's the exact same then if Charles is in turtle. Is that if all of a sudden, like, I like kick him or something, he has to adjust his balance. And in that split second, he's open for me to get him. That's his footwork. The other option is like inflict pain on him. Awesome. Which is like, I'll be nice. Like kneeling on someone's Achilles, like, because again, like he's like focused and trying to do stuff like that, and all of a sudden he opens up. Yeah, it's legit. And again, it's one of the funny things like from Iceland a couple of years ago, like Aaron Milan, like he deals with people who play this kind of stuff. He just lifts them by the hips all of a sudden. He gets in, grabs their hips and just goes, and then he essentially fucks their balance. And it's yeah, it's super clever. I'm like, so again, it's really funny because we're gifted so much in jiu-jitsu, we expect the armpits, and then like our basic brains are like going, why can't I get it anymore? And you start doing this iron fist shit into the armpits. All this kind of advanced ways of understanding jiu-jitsu we haven't got. Yet, again, you got those higher levels, they exist. Mess with people's balance, mess with their breathing, like smother them, like you watch them react then. Or just like inflict like some basic pain on them, like kneel on their IT band or something. I don't know, I don't care. And when they react, then go for those gaps. Again, you're gonna get the same things, all the techniques still work, you just respect the armpits more, because now you have to hunt them. So go back to that same drill, you're gonna go from running man to turtle. You're gonna try and hunt nicely in that gap. So say if I went from running man to turtle here, as I open up that gap, I know his legs are coming in the bottom. So next time, I'm gonna try and move without him catching me. And then he's gonna up the game a little bit, and now he's gonna try and catch me again. Okay, go. Go again. Try and catch me. All right, go. Okay, have some fun with it. Like you have to have that conversation, like one up on each other. Like, okay, start low, and then keep building it up until eventually you become a more efficient hunter. Does that make sense? And then when you're happy and like it gets really difficult, then hurt them, kick them in the arse, like kneel on their like Achilles or some shit. Like I don't know, pull their ears, be inventive. Off you go, have fun.
Can I see how you do it?
So, going back to my earlier story, why I got murdered on day one of my initiation into the sex cult. I was doing the old traditional styles of framing, and I was told your elbows are everywhere, Christopher. Actually, funny, like a couple of years later, he then explained this to me. He said, yeah, it's my favorite thing to do to upset purple belts. I was like, you know that was me, don't you? He was like, yeah, oh yeah, it was. So I was like, oh, good. Yeah, so the way I kind of, better how I explain it then, is distance between your elbow and your armpit is red, right? If someone's in that space, like, bad things are happening to you. You think anytime like someone's up there, like high mount or high side control or like a really high guard, like things are going wrong for you. Get them the hell out. The distance between, the space between your elbow and your hip or knee is amber. Like, it's not bad, but it's about to get bad. And that's why I don't think, and this is why I was convinced that this is terrible as a framing mechanism. Because the gap between your elbow and your body is always going to be thicker than a human wrist. So you might be doing this on the bottom, but anyone who's got any idea about them will just instantly pummel their way back in, and they go straight back into your armpit. Does that make sense? And that's why I say like you have to glue your forearm to your leg. The second that opens, you open up the amber space again, and the option to go back into your armpit comes back again. And so that's what I mean. Like if I move from here to here, and a tiny gap opens, I'm exposed again. Now someone's going to find that, and someone's going to get me. If it leaves my leg, like the amber's been recreated, and now they can hunt for me. Does that make sense? And so you really respect about keeping that tied to your damn leg. Like, I've tried to find ways over the years to make it work. I know there was like a drill I used to do. I loved doing it in Gracie-based gyms because I think it was hilarious. Is I'd start off by saying Hickson Gracie is a fraud. This is even better, it's on video. Then asking someone to tie me up and saying your black belt ain't worth shit. It's not how to do seminars. Can I borrow someone's belt? I'll show you why. Has anyone got a belt I can borrow?
There's belts.
It's no gi class.
I don't know, but people got gis on. Can I borrow a belt? Thank you.
I don't want my belt part of this shenanigans.
the shaming moment. You tie me up, Charles. Your black belt is worth shit, so. Okay, tie me up. This is what I do to my white
This is the
belts.
second cult thing.
Yep.
It is, yeah.
First we start with bondage. You
Yeah.
want a proper time?
Just knocked it at the back,
just throw
yeah.
it
Just,
out, alright,
just
we can do this.
tie me together.
Like a bow?
Whatever's fancy. There we go. Okay, so I know it's getting weird by the second. Shit, man, that's actually pretty tight.
You're welcome.
Okay, so this is based on like the urban legends that Hickson Gracie could have his arms tied up and survive many black belts. All right. Any brown belts want to beat me up? Please, let's go for it. Right, I want you to submit the ever-loving shit out of me. Go. And this is what makes it funny, is that I just became invincible. Like, by tying my arms up, who's this? Thank you, sir. By tying my arms up, he couldn't get any form of control over me. He couldn't submit any of my joints, they're tied the fuck up. And anytime he went for my neck, because he didn't have any control, I could just spin out. And that's what makes that story hilarious. And that's why he's not a fraud, obviously, I just like piss people off. Is he made himself invincible by tying himself up. And that's exactly what I'm asking you guys to do. That you saw there. If I can move without opening up my armpits, I become invincible. Does that make sense? And so that's why sometimes I tie my white belts up. Just because they lose arm privileges. Like if I think they're going, "Rah," I'm like, not today. Come here. You've lost arms today. And then they respect it. Then they don't die for the rest of the day. And like, oh, okay, Chris is maybe onto something. Does that make sense? It doesn't, and I'm ashamed this is all going on video. So I wanted to go back and do old school side control and feel that opening up of this. And it's amazing how much in jiu-jitsu we build in terrible practices to make our own lives easier. So like side control, for example, I did an AMA yesterday, like Ask Me Anything. It was almost like a group private on the whiteboard because I love drawing shit. I'm sad it's not here. The distance between your shoulder and your hip is always going to be longer than the distance between your shoulder and your elbow. Yeah? Make sense? Yeah. Like, basic human anatomy. So if I get side control, old school side control on Charles, head and arm control. My shoulder's a natural block here, roughly in line with his shoulder, which means that even though I could be inhabiting his armpit, I move in any way, he's going to frame on my hip. Because this is always going to be shorter than this. Does that make sense? So we teach people head and arm control because we then build in a natural fail-safe. Because people can just like instantly bring their armpits closed again. That looks dumb to me now. And that is the same across a lot of jiu-jitsu, unfortunately, is that we build in like terrible little systems for ourselves and then make our lives more difficult. Yeah, as a tall person especially, this now makes more sense because now I'm inhabiting his armpits. Now if he tries to get his armpits closed again, he can't, just because I move my arm to the other side. Again, you respect the armpits more, so as soon as you get them, you learn to keep them open, because the last thing I want to do is pass his guard, finally get an armpit and go, oh my God, yes. Oh, for God's sake. And you're out. Does that make sense? I don't have to teach you any side control escapes, essentially. Just grab your own groin. Oh, I didn't mean it to sound so sexy, but so if Charles has side control on me, instead of doing this where I'm giving him the amber space still and he can get back into my armpits, all I'm going to do is grab my ass. So let's go. So as we're sparring, so let's play. At one. Two. I'm out. That's all I need to know. I just need to get my hands back down here, get my elbows back down towards my hips. He's now out of any control. I can just go back into running man and get out. So he now has to respect. If he takes my armpits, he goddamn keeps my armpits. Does that make sense? So feel old school side control. This, and feel how easy it is just to open up the armpits again and get back into good control. And then just put your hands by your asshole or your groin or wherever they can reach. Not theirs. 1. Okay, keep going. 2. And now you feel the loss of control happen. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Basic side control defense. Grab your asshole. Off you go. Anyone knows anything then? Benefits? Did anyone feel like the loss of control when the arms came back down? And this is why it feels so dumb, is that we do this anyway. You shrimp. What are you doing when you shrimp? You're reconnecting your elbow back to your knee to get them out of the space they're in here. Like, this is day one. But again, we wait until we're in a terrible place and then try and find our way out of it, instead of just going, why don't I just close the door earlier? And it's because one of the questions I put forward earlier that didn't come up for the controversial thing that me and Christian did in the conference room was, is sport ruining BJJ? No. I think martial arts are ruining BJJ. Is that we want to be a combat sport. We pride ourselves and we are the beginning of MMA. And yet then, every time like we look at the sport aspect of jiu-jitsu, we go, no, it's ruining the martial art. It's supposed to be self-defense. Shut up. Like, sport is making us better. Like, we want to be a combat sport, so why don't we train like a combat sport? Why don't we train like boxers and wrestlers? They have a defensive posture, and then they fight out of it. And when it isn't safe to do so, they return to their defensive posture. But for some stupid-ass reason, we train like martial artists. We have we have problems, and then we try and find technical answers. Like, oh, I'm stuck in this guard. I need some new passes. Oh, this has happened. I need some new escapes. Does that sound familiar? Like, that's what martial artists do. That's what, like, you know, kung fu and all those kind of things are doing. Like aikido, like, he does this, I do this. They do this, I do this. Instead of wrestlers and boxers, which have a base level of knowledge of defense, and then they have counters going forwards. And that's what then makes this fun, is that you imagine like someone in the UFC who's got really, really good striking. They can choose to put their hands down and fire their chin up, but that's a choice. Like, they know how to cover their chin. They're not stupid, but they've made the choice to fire their hands down. If they need to fire their hands up, they're against a superior striker. They'll put their hands back up. There's a very, very good video of Rafa Mendes guard passing in competition, and he fights with his legs wide open. Like, he approaches all the way up here. And you watch him do his passing. At no point does he ever let anyone behind his knees. And that's interesting then. So he is basically fighting with his hands down, but he knows how to cover his chin. Because then as people go for his guard, he just pummels the way out. And he's basically using it as bait. So as they throw their punches and are exposing from their open guard, he then pummels his way around and goes straight in. Does that make sense? So if Charles is playing open guard, I could approach his open guard wide open, and as he goes for like a Del Hiva hook or anything like that, I move my leg out the way and don't let him get it. But I have to know that that's important first, that these gaps are important to make the choice of opening them. If I don't know they're important, I have to be a beginner boxer, moving around with my hands up, which is essentially this. Mm-hmm. I can now approach his guard with my heel and my asshole, and my elbow's nice and tight, and now he can't go for any guard. He can't go for half or full guard or Del Hiva or anything like that. But this is me learning, right, these are the important spaces. And so in the future, once I know it, I can then make the choice of opening and then open up the gaps and play with him. Does that make sense? But how can you get to that level if you haven't done the basics first? Does that make sense? And this is, again, like, after being a member of this sex cult for years, I barely use any of this stuff anymore. I don't really use Running Man, I don't really use Turtle, because I know where the gaps are. So my Turtle, I fight like this in Turtle. That's nothing like what I've been showing here. But it's because I know if someone's around my side, and if Charles at my side here, I'd be blocking, and as he's attacking me, when he goes round, I block again, and I hand fight it. Does that make sense? I'm baiting him. I'm making him open up. But I can only make that choice because I know that this is important. Does that make sense? And that's pretty much what, like, I don't think I've ever met a black belt that doesn't do this instinctually, if not explicitly, is that you can't get to a high level in jiu-jitsu without doing this. Like, I remember one of the years that Hobson Barbosa was here, and he was approaching my De La Riva, like, completely closed off, like here, so nothing would happen. But does he ever explain it to everyone? Unknown. But he knew the gaps were there. Does that make sense? But it has to be a choice. I had the question just, and we'll show it, because after that last drill, what about gi chokes? Doesn't leave your collar open? No. How soggy is your gi? It's fine. All right. I won't wear it. Not all of it. God's sake, just the jacket. And do you bow and arrow choke me? Can you? Yeah. Thank you. So, essentially, I know Preet has moved on, but old school. So, anytime anyone goes around my collar and grabs hold, you have a control hand and a choke hand. So this is the choke hand, this would be the control hand, okay? So, if someone grabs a choke here, and I just go and look at him, there is no choke. So if he went for a bow and arrow choke on me, here, okay, is that he has to have control, and he has a choke hand. If I just go look at the armpit that's choking me, I'm out. I just unravel the choke, which means his control now has to be superior. And so all of a sudden, our attacks in jiu-jitsu have to be better, because this is essentially all chokes that don't involve wrapping your gi several times around someone's neck, is that there's a choke hand and a control hand. And it's not the choke hand I need to be fearful of. If he went for a choke on my collar, went for a collar choke on me, I went, oh no! Now I'm doomed. But if I instead just did this, I'm out. Does that make sense? And that applies to so many chokes, like we talked about on the back just. If, paper cutter. So he's underneath my arm here, and the choke hand is here, and it's going to bite down across my neck. Yeah, cool. Again, exactly what I just said. There's a choke hand, and he's having to lift me towards the choke. If this didn't exist, and he went for that same thing, I can just turn towards him. There's no choke. Anytime someone gets hold of your collar, just go look at it. Even cross collars. Like, if Mike got Mount, he went for a cross collar on me. I can just look towards it. Like, keep the hand in. Turn this way so people can see. There we go. There's nothing there. Leave me alone. Does that make sense? Again, it's only through panic and stupidity that we go, oh no. And then we give people control, and then we make our lives more difficult. Instead of going, I'm fine. Nothing's going to happen to me. Clock chokes. Can you clock choke? Again, he needs control, because otherwise I just lie on my side. And I just go looking at him. Does that make sense? Cheers, dude. That wasn't as sweaty as I imagined it could be. Any questions so far? I've talked a lot about not a lot. Has it made sense? Thank God. Oh, awesome. Next part then is I showed like an armbar idea the other day. Q armbar. You armbarred me the other day, wasn't it? Can you do it again? Can you do it again? Is Omid still here? Oh man, I could have borrowed him. Yeah, can you armbar me, please? Come on, fuck me up.
The same shit.
Sorry. I just do. I couldn't realize, figure out how that worked for years. It was voodoo. Until I then started speaking to leg lockers and then actually watching how Preet shut it down, is that general rule for joint locks is you control above and below the one you want. And so there's a positional joint and a submission joint. So if I want to obliterate someone's knee with a heel hook, I need to control their hip and their heel, aka their ankle. Where is he? I'm going to ask anyone for this. It's going to be Charles. Senkaku Misa.
Oh, yes, I can do this.
Yeah, so he's controlling my hip and then he controls my heel. Does that make sense? Which one's the more important one to hold on to though? As in, if his hip control over me was terrible, all he has is a foot. But if his hip control is awesome, he's going to get my foot back eventually. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So the more core joint, the positional joint of every joint submission is the more important joint. But because we're basic monkeys, like we focus more on what we're doing with our hands. We go, oh, I need to hold onto the leg this way. And we focus too much on what our hands are doing, like ankle locks and the arm bars and everything, instead of how we control the positional joint. This is a position. The submission, the heel hook, is this moment here. But up until that moment, it was just a position. It was honey hole, senkaku, whatever you want to call it, 411. Does that make sense? And so I'm not defending heel hooks if I defend this. I'm defending a position. I'm defending the positional joint. And so the reason why I was happy getting out of that arm bar is because he didn't have my shoulder. Again, what would matter more to me if he had hold of my wrist or had hold of my shoulder? Which one's going to eventually result in an arm bar? If Charles went for an arm bar on me, and I did this, he has my shoulders, but he doesn't have my wrists. But eventually, one day, my grip will die, I will get old, and this will happen. So that is an arm bar defense. This is a spiderweb defense. It's a positional defense. I'm defending my shoulder. I couldn't give a shit if he has my wrist because he doesn't have my shoulder, which means I can adjust my way out of it. Does that make sense? So all of a sudden it changes the narrative and actually how we do any of our submissions. We control the positional joint over the submission joint. We have to change, we have terrible dexterity on our legs. And so we then have to change, what we're focusing on. This should only take 5 seconds to learn. We're very good with our hands. What we do with our legs is terrible. Leg lockers know this. They know about double trouble. They know about creating horrendous bites on people's thighs and stuff. Like if you ever make like an elite level leg locker, they will tap you just how they hold your leg. Like it is goddamn terrifying. Like it feels like you're about to have your femur snapped in half. But they know this. Like they know they need to control the positional joint. They've had great minds working on it. But for the rest of jiu-jitsu, it's like, what the hell? This seems like magic. So I'm going to use you. We're gonna make this better. I want you to when you go for the armbar, I want you to get my shoulder, belly button side of your legs, not butthole side. So I want it through there. Now crush the ever-loving shit out of my shoulder. Like obliterate it. Like squeeze the life out of it. Like you're gonna crush a watermelon for some businessmen. Yeah, now I'm fucked. Does that make sense? So all of a sudden, like how he does his submissions has changed. He's now obliterating my shoulder, and now I can't move anywhere. Because when he just had his legs draped across me romantically, I could lie on my side, and now I can move my thumb face down. Okay? And now there's no armbar in this plane of motion, which means I can pop it out. Does that make sense? So best example of this then, because I don't want to steal the armbar, is ankle locks. Can you do a basic down the barrel for me? Yeah, straight. So if Charles has no control over my knee and he starts going for an ankle lock on me, there's nothing there. But the second he gets great control over my knee, okay, I can maybe put the boot on, but that's me defending the submission joint, my foot. But my knee is still caught, and eventually I'll get old, I'll get tired, and he'll snap my ankle. But if I can get my knee free, so let's go, I can take away the pain. Does that make sense? So all of a sudden, how he does his submissions has to change. He has to squeeze my knee more. So we're just gonna do like a basic ankle lock. So do an ankle lock if you haven't done one before. I should have by now, hopefully. Good thing to think about as well. If they can put the boot on, you're not controlling the foot. Like you should roll your shoulder over the toes to the point where try and move your foot. Now I can't move his foot. Now I've actually got below the joint I want. I want his ankle. I now actually have his foot. And then I'm just going to do like a basic control over his knee. I'm going to finish it. And now he's just going to escape his knee. And now I'm going to try and finish it with no knee control. Does that make sense? And then I'm going to try and find the tightest knee control I can find until he can't get out, and then go try it again. Does that make sense? So do an ankle lock basic, do an ankle lock where they can escape their knee, and then do an ankle lock where you're crushing the ever-loving hell out of the knee, and see how much that changes your ankle locks. Make sense? Then apply that idea to everything in jiu-jitsu. Every goddamn joint lock. Off you go. Just make sure I explain it well enough. This isn't like when I showed the side control thing earlier. Again, that was like more of an escape. That means you've messed up and now you're having to use it instead of like looking from a boxing wrestling perspective. If my attack has failed, I just return. Again, this whole posture, like keeping my elbows in, not letting people behind my knees, behind my head, or in my armpits. It's what wrestlers have been doing for thousands of years. Your ancestors are spinning in their graves right now. Like the fact that you're going, really? And what's the first wrestling drill you ever learn in jiu-jitsu? Pummeling. Why? Because he's in my goddamn armpit. And what do I want? Him out of my armpits. So we do this on day one. All this stuff we do on day one, you haven't been able to get this far in jiu-jitsu without seeing this stuff already. But unfortunately, we do it after the fact. He has my armpit, I pummel in. He has side control, I pummel into a shrimp. Instead of, just close it first. That's literally all we were saying. That's what literally I felt so stupid when I first heard this. It was like, did you think about not letting me in there in the first place? Ah, genius. But then, a twist in the narrative. For years, I've been showing Running Man. And, the idea of like closing up the gaps and I suddenly realized that I'd been lying. This is gonna suck. So, you're right-handed.
I am.
Cool. So if Charles is trying to hunt me here, he's trying to hunt on an unnatural seatbelt for him. His left arm's around my neck and he's trying to use his right arm to punch his way through. Does that make sense? And so for me, this is my strong arm, this is my right hand. And so it's very easy for me to close this door down. So try and get a seatbelt. He's trying to do an unnatural seatbelt on my strongest arm. Now my left arm's on top. Now it's a natural seatbelt. You don't even have to hold my wrist. Just get a seatbelt grip. Bollocks. So all of a sudden, 50% of the times I've been doing Running Man, it hasn't worked. I have no idea why. It's because we have strong arms, you have weak arms. You're right-handed or left-handed. So for him, that is now a natural seatbelt. So it's very easy for him to just punch a hole through on my unnatural side. Does that make sense? And the thing that kind of clicked this for me is I had a blue belt. And he had an amazing half guard. Like, stunning. Like, he could wrestle fuck everyone over. But he wasn't very good at anything else. He was okay, just not good. I couldn't understand it, why someone had such great details in one very narrow part of jiu-jitsu. He also had amazing pressure passing, but couldn't do anything else. I was like, so strange. Like, why are you so good at this, like, one half guard move, but nothing else? Like, it doesn't make sense to only be so good at one part of jiu-jitsu. And then one day I said to him, like, yo, you left-handed? He was like, yeah, why? I was like, oh, that's interesting. And it's because if I'm in normal half guard, here's my right hand, my good hand, here's my weak hand, my left hand. So if I try and come up and wrestle and like bully Charles over, I'm trying to drive off my weak leg and trying to wrestle with my weak arm and get like an old school sweep. But I'm hitting his right hand side, his dexterous side, so he's just gonna kill me. And so for 13 years, I couldn't figure out why I couldn't old school people over in half guard. So I'd come up, all of a sudden, this kind of nonsense would happen, especially with Charles, he loves Darcy's. Until I realized what this kid was doing. He's left-handed, which meant his good arm was on top, and his good leg was the driving leg. And so I started playing then half guard on this side. All of a sudden, I'm now wrestling everyone over like it's like a different sport. And all of a sudden, he's going to try and dart me with his weak arm. So as I come up, now I can get him because I'm driving with my good leg and attacking with my good arm. So now I don't have one half guard, I have two. They're entirely different positions. One is orthodox, one is southpaw. And it was very interesting to me that this one kid was like completely able to like have an amazing half guard game because we all pass on that one side of jiu-jitsu. If I say go to side control, Charles, same goddamn side every time. We only live in literally this one plane of jiu-jitsu. If we go to pass, it's here. If we go get side control, like guys are just doing side control today, it's here. It's the same shit every time because we're right-handed predominantly people. And so there's another one of my very, very intelligent students, I hope he watches this video. He's a tattoo artist. And he said, you don't have a good hand and a bad hand, you have a dexterous hand and a control hand. Mm-hmm. He said that when you draw, you try and do it with your bad hand behind your back, you can't do it, doesn't make sense. Because one hand holds the paper and your weight and the other hand does the drawing. Makes sense coming from a tattoo artist. Which then, if I'm in side control this side, left hand holds the paper, right hand does the destroying, does the drawing. I'm going to hit Kimuras and arm bars and dasses and all this kind of cool stuff. The second it flips onto the other side, backwards as hell. Right, now I'm kind of controlling with the dexterous hand and trying to hunt with the crap hand. It's all gone wrong. Sorry, I'm into rolling time. Actually. So all of a sudden I realized I now hold side control this way. Left hand paper, right hand pen. And all of a sudden I hit guillotines and all manner of cool things on this side. So all of a sudden I have two side controls. Does that make sense? It was also really funny watching his class yesterday. Was it yesterday or Monday? You did guillotines. Yeah, because you did guillotines on your right arm. You passed half guard on this side. I was like, that's amazing. That's what I do. Yeah. So whilst, again, this is one of the things that my student did, is that whilst he was on this side, he caught lots of guillotines, left-handed, so he'd pass this way. Does that make sense? But for the rest of us, we're going to do this kind of stuff, framing and all that kind of jazz. Does that make sense? Yeah, all of a sudden if you pass someone's half guard this way, I ain't framing at all, I can't knee cut for shit. But I catch guillotines all day long because my right hand doing the job. So all of a sudden I have two styles of passing depending on which side we're on. And the only reason I have to mention this right at the end of the class is this whole defensive stuff, this whole covering and all that kind of thing, you will find that sometimes it will fail. You have no idea why. Maybe it's the hunting, maybe you left a gap, but sometimes it can be as stupid as you just had the right arm involved and it actually worked into a positive side. Because then, going back to this left-handed student, if I went to my regular, anyone here left-handed? You won't have any issue. We have one. So, can I borrow you? Is I could go to running man on my good side, but this is probably your natural seatbelt. So if you went for a seatbelt on me, yeah, that's bullshit. And this is what was happening with my left-handed student, is that every time I dropped to running man, normal for me, it'd be actually a good seatbelt hunting side for him, and he used to catch me on my back. I was like, damn. So just something to consider, there's actually a problem. Like, we talk about in MMA, we talk about in boxing, it's an orthodox versus a southpaw. Have you ever heard that idea in jiu-jitsu? That could be a problem? Mm-hmm. It's very, like, what the hell, this is a thing? Like, left-handed students have issues sometimes, but it's an actual, then, a problem. So if you're actually using some of these defensive ideas and using, like, this covering, if you sometimes fail, ask the other person, you left-handed by chance? And if they are, like, okay, that's why. Like, it was a strength problem. Any questions on anything I've said? Again, I haven't said a lot, but I've said a lot about nothing. It didn't make sense. I know it didn't make sense. I blacked out like 45 minutes ago. I've just been rambling ever since. If anyone wants to ask me any questions about anything, about any of this stuff, or about jiu-jitsu in general, I am here until Sunday. So please pester me. I'm usually quite friendly. If not, I don't want to enjoy all rolling time anymore, but thank you for sticking around. Thank you for sticking around to the end of the day on midweek. It's a terrible slot. Thank you all. Have a good rest of the camp.